obligate powerful institutions in society to do their part and maintain moral purity by not helping bad actors do bad things. In this speech, I'll first be going through framing before moving on to our main first substantive argument. First on framing, what does this limitation from payment processors look like? We think this likely looks like, for example, they ban exchanges with certain groups or certain actors that they deem to have done immoral things in the past. Or, for example, they'll use technology or like their own personal resources, like investigators or whatever, to automatically look over items or look over transactions to see if they fit the category of immorality. But then, how exactly do we define this immorality in this debate? We say that the sort of things that get banned are transactions that the company deems will lead to someone being harmed. So, for example, this might look like banning certain items from being purchased, banning certain items from going through economic exchange, like military-grade weapons, like for example, like weapons that you can use to kill other people. For example, like certain, I don't know, like drugs or things like this. So ultimately, I think these big companies, they should use their technology and other processes, like investigators, like other resources, to look over, detect, and investigate suspicious transactions, because they currently have the technology to do this. It's 2025, and AI and like other sorts of technology have advanced to a point where they definitely have the capabilities to look over these things. So yeah, like just some more examples of what they might be looking for. They might be looking for like the items that are being bought, where they're being bought, etc. And so now onto our main substantive argument then. We believe that they have a principal obligation of responsibility to make sure that they aren't being an accessory to harm. So the premise behind this is all of the stuff, all of the transactions that go through these companies, they're going to harm people in one way or another. The sorts of transactions that we want to stop from happening on our side. Because if they're buying items, or if bad people are buying items that they're going to use to harm other people, for example, they're buying weapons, for example, they're buying dangerous substances. For example, they're buying dangerous materials to use to make dangerous things. Ultimately, if the credit card company, if these payment processors allow these transactions to take place, this is going to mean that they essentially helped make the process for these bad actors easier. They expedited their process. They made it easier for them because that's ultimately what these payment processors do, right? They make their lives easier, they make their lives more convenient, and they allow these criminals to do these things on a larger scale. And so, in doing this, the companies themselves face moral harm. They face a principal obligation to own up to what they're doing, because ultimately they're helping these bad people. They're helping these bad actors do bad things when they allow these transactions to take place. So let's look at what these payment processors actually do, right? PayPal, MasterCards. These are all home names that everybody knows. Why? Because they have substantial influence in modern society in 2025. Everybody knows what these are because everybody uses them. They have an insane impact on our economy, and they account for a massive percentage of transactions that go through in our modern digital age. Because of this means that they as a powerful institution have a responsibility to make sure that they have moral purity, that they're not, for example, being an accessory, that these companies aren't, for example, being an accessory to murder. They aren't helping bad people do bad things. So, because let's look at what happens when, for example, they don't do this, right? They lose trust from society. Because these are powerful institutions. Let's say, for example, you wouldn't trust a government official. You wouldn't trust to have a president who was actively a criminal in their past in their history, right? If they actively did bad things. The same logic applies to these powerful financial institutions because they hold so much, because of the fact that they hold so much power, they hold so much influence. Imagine you as a person living in a society where you know these big companies that have so much power over you, that handle literally all of your transactions that take place, if they themselves constantly help people to murder other people. They help people harm other people in various ways. These powerful institutions in society, ultimately you as a person, these citizens in society, they're going to feel unsafe. They're going to feel unsure about themselves because of the fact that they know that these bad institutions are affecting them. And so, before I move on, are there any points of information from the closing opposition team or opening opposition team? Moving on then. So, impacts on our side of the house. We believe that the very obvious practical implication is that people are better protected on our side of the house, even if we only marginally limit the ability of these bad actors to do bad things. Even if it's only a teeny tiny bit, we make their lives a teeny tiny bit more inconvenient. At the end of the day, as long as we're able to save one person from being harmed, as long as we're able to protect one individual, that is enough to win us this debate, because ultimately that is what matters. Side opposition needs to provide us with a model as to how they can protect the lives of more individuals without these payment transactions being looked over by these institutions like MasterCard, like PayPal, or whatever. We accept that in the current status quo, this might be inaccurate in some cases. For example, this might lead to some transactions that are completely innocent not going through. We accept that this might happen, and there's no way for us to prove that this won't happen. But ultimately, how do we mitigate this? We think we're absolutely fine with this. We think that it's fine if certain innocent transactions don't go through, because at the end of the day, this will probably be uncommon, right? Considering the fact that technology is continually advancing, these PayPal, MasterCard, these companies are continually adapting their strategies to the modern age to better fit how these things work, and so ultimately, they're getting better at actually managing these transactions. And even if that's not the case, we think that it's still justified for us to slightly inconvenience these people that are making completely innocent transactions, because at the end of the day, there are other avenues they can use to buy stuff, right? You don't always have to use these digital sorts of softwares to buy stuff. It's only a slight inconvenience. While on our side of the house, we inconvenience bad actors from doing bad things, even if it's only by a little bit, even if it only saves one person. At the end of the day, we're saving lives on our side of the house, which side opposition does not get. So in order to, number one, maintain societal trust with these powerful institutions in society, and number two, to protect innocent people from being harmed, this is why we win this debate on opening government. This is why we're so proud to propose.
Thank you for the speech. Then I will invite the lead opposition here.
So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. This house, as the opening opposition, would not limit these transactions for services or products that these companies deem as immoral. Why? Let me tell you for many reasons. Number one, who are the people actually deeming these deeds as immoral, right? They're the companies. And what these big companies usually have in their own minds is their own agendas, whether it's political agendas, social agendas, economical, or even personal agendas. They are the people who get to be able to deem what they believe as immoral. For example, a Russian was actually held hostage and kidnapped because she decided she wanted to make a donation to Ukraine and actually help orphans because they're literally starving and dying under the war. Yet she got kidnapped because the Russian government deemed it as immoral. So really, during this debate, we have to think, who are the people deeming these people as immoral, right? Because opening government side provides no mechanism whatsoever except saying that these people deeming actions as immoral are the companies. And as we know, big corporations usually don't have innocent people's interests at their best hearts. They usually are very they're really greedy, they're really power hungry. You really think big corporations who have billions and billions of dollars, you really think they're gonna wanna help an innocent civilian versus if they could gain more money? People are driven by greed, especially these big corporations. So what they deem as immoral might actually be moral to some people. Furthermore, we tell you on opening opposition, people have a free will. It's their money. Why are you limiting how they want to spend their money? So if it's their money, they can to do as they please. And how would you know if it's immoral or not? Limiting, okay, even if you decide that it's really immoral, blah, blah, blah. But we tell you, limiting is very ineffective. It's not going to actually help solve the problem. Opening government side likes to live in their delusional world of how limiting transactions will solve all problems.
The example you gave was an extreme example of this taking place in an authoritarian country, Russia. Could you give an example of how these so-called profit incentives that you talked about would take place in an average liberal democracy and how they would influence the overlook of transactions in an actual average liberal democracy?
That's a good point. However, if you look at it, lots of these big companies are run by Jewish people. Because Jewish people, they own a lot of these big companies, right? For example, what if there is a war war between, what if there's a war right now going between Israel and Palestine? So what if these big, Jewish people, they decide they don't want to allow, donations to go to Palestine, or, things that can actually help with humanitarian aid in Palestine, because they feel they're, Jewish, obviously, so they don't want to help Palestine. And we tell you, these examples are very true, because if you look at universities around the world, for example, the Ivy League, UPenn, right? Because there were so many Jewish people that are so high up in the UPenn social ladder, that these Palestinians that actually go to the school, they were actually denied their ability to actually advocate for themselves, because these Jewish people were the ones that were controlling the school. And we tell you, this is what happens in these big corporations. Usually Jewish people or white people or the majorities are the ones who control these corporations. So people who might want to transaction or pay or donate to people who are minorities, which these majorities agree are immoral, that means they are not able to do as they like, even though it's their money, it's their free will, and they should be able to donate and do however they please with their own hard-earned money. Now, secondly, we tell you, limiting is not effective at all. It doesn't solve any problem. Government science fails to tell us how limiting will solve a problem. Because we can tell you, you might be just what if, let's say someone decided to do something really immoral with their money, but instead of using Apple Pay or MasterCard or their Visa, they can just use it with cash. They probably have a lot of dirty money lying around, right? Because we tell you, most things that the public deems as dangerous or immoral are already illegal. So this means that people, most likely criminals or big mafia bosses, they'll probably just use dirty money anyways. So limiting these transactions won't matter, seeing as the fact that not any illegal activity is likely happening over these big transaction companies, right? And even if we bite the bullet and say, okay, maybe there's one or two stupid criminal or scammers who decided they want the people who they're scamming to pay them over MasterCard or Visa. We tell you this is really stupid, because if you're limiting them, you're basically just giving them an escape route. Because right now, if they really are stupid enough to accept a payment or transaction over MasterCard or Visa, this allows police to be able to catch them more easily, because they're leaving a paper trail. They're leaving a paper trail for the police to try and catch on. So this will actually help even more people. Because let's say, for example, there's a huge big scammer, right? And they just so happen to receive a payment over a MasterCard, and they actually take it, right? So now the police who's been looking for this scammer for ages and ages to come, they're finally able to catch the scammer because he left a paper trail over MasterCard. And this is going to save millions or even hundreds of thousands of people from being scammed even further, because the police are able to catch this person, right? We tell you that government side provides no mechanism for what problem limiting transaction will actually solve. And we tell you that lots of these immoral deeds seen by these companies are actually only accordingly and aligned to their own agendas to further profit and benefit themselves even more. And we tell you that actually limiting these transactions, which these companies are deeming immoral, it can actually harm even more civilians. So instead of the impact that government side wants to bring, which is helping people, we tell you that they're actually denying these innocent civilians the right to be able to gain humanitarian aid, or they're denying these people being scammed to catch a scammer, because they're literally limiting their abilities to receive aid, and they're basically helping big criminals, because now these criminals they're not able to show evidence. The police aren't able to prosecute them with enough evidence to prove that they're actually scammed. Yeah.
And what would happen to over 6 months?
Yeah, so they're basically denying innocent civilians the right to be able to gain humanitarian aid that was intended for them. They're literally leaving an escape route for criminals, because instead of criminals leaving a paper trail, they're now going to moving dirty money, which is even worse, because it can actually potentially harm more people, because who knows, they might traffic, which is really true, they might traffic local people to hire them or to kidnap them or to threaten them to move their dirty money for them, and that gets even more people involved, and that makes it even more dangerous for all the people globally. So if the factors in this debate are really the most innocent, poor civilians that are the ones being harmed, the innocent people, we tell you that government side is actually harming them even more, while opposition side is actually protecting them and the greater good. And for all the reasons above, we are so proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you for the speech. Then next I will invite Lady Prime Minister.
starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, the only mechanism that LO gives us is a racist representation of Jewish people and how they influence these companies. We've already won this debate insofar as the LO has failed to explain how they actually have any positive impact on their side. Firstly, a couple of experience rebuttals before moving on to my extension on how we're actually able to better get companies to cater towards these moral actions through the very profit incentive that LO seems to demonize. Firstly, a couple of experience rebuttals then. One of their main arguments is about, how these company executives are self-interested people, and what they deem as immoral might not necessarily be immoral in the conventional sense. A couple of responses here. Firstly, this just isn't true, right? I'll explain later within my argumentation, because the rebuttals within this argument are mostly ingrained. I'll explain later, though, why these companies have the incentive, even the profit incentive, to actually limit these immoral transactions, because it makes them look palatable towards most consumers within the economy. This is again ingrained in my extension. But on to their second point about how this is ultimately ineffective, because a lot of things that consumers do in the status quo, most of these dirty things are already made illegal. This is just a very negligent argument for them to run, right, panel? There's a lot of issues with our status quo, right? There's a lot of issues that already exist. If everything can be banned and just prevented from happening, then they would be banned and prevented from happening, but they simply aren't. For instance, in the US, there are very flexible gun laws in certain counties that allow you to get guns regardless of whether or not it's illegal. It's extremely easy for people to do this. They can literally make illegal transactions on PayPal, and they're very hard to monitor in that sense. So we tell you that this simply isn't true, that these are just avoided because people do this, because people don't do this, it's illegal, right? But even if it's true that it's insanely ineffective, even if it's true that not a lot of people use PayPal to make these transactions because it's illegal in the first place, we told you that even if there's a very small minority of people that do it in the first place, those are the people we care about, right? Because as my PM already told you, even if we're able to save one life, one person's life, one very marginal person's life in the first place, we told you then, panel, that this impact significantly outweighs the violation of freedom that we create to these other individuals that they seem to care about so much in their speech. But lastly, onto this very last-minute argument about preventing a paper trail, I think this ultimately doesn't exist on the opposition side anyways, right? Note, panel, that in the status quo, there's already very strong digital privacy laws for police to be able to actually use these financial records inside the courtroom and to be able to actually access these PayPal transaction information in the first place. So we told you that it's unlikely the police is going to access this information under their site in the first place and use that to prosecute criminals. But even then, even if we buy what they're saying is true, we still have other methods to catch criminals, right? As Stephen already explained to you, there's a lot of other technology that we have in the status quo that allows us to better catch criminals, not just through PayPal, not just through Visa or MasterCard. There's also things like better and upgraded CCTV surveillance. There's also things like better financial tracking networks that don't necessarily have to go through PayPal. At the end of the day, it's extremely unclear what is the exclusive benefit of having to track PayPal as a means of prosecuting these criminals. And we don't see any mechanism from site opposition, and we highly encourage them to come up and tell us this later. We don't see any mechanism from them explaining why the current means of tracking criminals that we have in the status quo is insufficient to the point where they must necessarily violate digital privacy laws in order to get this information. But before I move on to my arguments, are there any POIs? I highly encourage them from opening. 3, 2, 1. Okay, moving on then to my argument on ultimately how we're able to set a precedent where other major companies can also engage in more morally conscious behavior. Note, panel, that this is going to engage with the bulk of your argumentation when it comes to how companies have this profit incentive to not necessarily go against things that are immoral. So ultimately then, how does this argument look like? We told you that companies like PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard, these are all major companies, and their actions would have significant influence on the economy. So even if they are such clearly profit incentivized corporations, the fact that they start behaving immorally, the fact that they start doing all of these actions in the first place, this is going to draw a lot of media attention, right? This is going to create a lot of sensitivity within the media to actually start discussing about how corporations can act more morally, to actually promote this discourse on how corporations can actually start behaving like this. So we told you that this is going to be picked up by consumers and media. What would this ultimately lead to? This is going to lead to a revolutionary market trend. Because since these are major market leaders within the economy in and of itself, they are going to break headlines and ultimately set a precedent for how other firms ought to operate in the economy. They're going to set a precedent on how other firms ought to behave more morally and be more morally complicit within the actions going on their platforms. This is especially important given that consumers have the capacity to quote-unquote vote with their money. That is to say, support companies which they deem to be morally legitimate or they deem to be morally, supporting their moral compass. So this creates far more of an incentive for other firms in the market to actually behave more morally as well when they're being influenced by these major market leaders. Especially because the media is going to sensationalize this, right? They're going to raise the standard for other corporations to also behave more morally, to actually behave more morally cautious when it comes to how they work in the economy. What is the secondary impact of this? We told you that the secondary impact of this is unique towards social media companies. How is this true? We told you that social media companies also in the economy get added pressure to actually take care of what's going on in their platforms. Why is this going to happen? The problem in the status quo under their side, under both sides, I guess, is that laws protect companies from being complicit to these crimes. Even if a crime happens on your platform, the law doesn't necessarily hold you to be morally culpable or hold you to be prosecuted for those crimes. So companies have no legal incentive to actually take care of this. But why would they have this incentive under our side? We told you, when the media applies this external pressure on them, when the media is actually able to provide this pressure towards companies to do things, even if it's not necessarily in their legal interest to do so, we told you that this is ultimately going to benefit society as a whole, because companies care a lot about how their brand image looks. Companies, especially the oligopolies in this, in this motion, PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard, these companies care about how their brand image looks. They care about how they look towards consumers, how they look towards other people in the economy. So ultimately, then, they would also have this incentive, especially social media companies. They would have this incentive to actually take care of what's going on in their platform, because now the media is actually targeting them. Because in the status quo, the issue was that nobody really cared about it, right? Because it was an accepted standard for companies to behave like this. But under our side, we tell you that since the standard is severely raised, with these major market leaders actually caring about what's happening in the status quo, actually caring about what's happening in the market, and actually caring about what these companies are supporting, we tell you that these companies would have this very, this profit incentive that LO deems to be so malicious and nefarious. They would actually have this profit incentive to genuinely take care of what's immoral and what's moral. They wouldn't do this just because it violates Jewish religion or Jewish faith. None of this anti-Semitic propaganda that LO brings to. For all these reasons, so proud to propose.
For his speech. Then I'd like to welcome the deputy with the position to be here.
At the very start of Government Bench's first speech, they tell us that there are privacy laws, which is exactly why their model will never work in the first place. So I would like to start with some rebuttals, and then I'll move on to our extensions about a political agenda. So first, they talk about immorality and how they define it as drugs and weapons. We already tell you in the first speech that most immoral things that are deemed okay, that are deemed dangerous, are already illegal for governments, right? We don't see how this model is any more necessary than the laws that we already have in place. So what is the counterfactual that we have? We simply say we just strengthen the laws already in place that do not allow illegal activity, such as fraud, etc., drugs already. We tell you that instead of trying to have this very ineffective solution to solve this problem, we just directly strengthen those laws, we strengthen investigation, we spend more time, we spend more effort, we spend more time campaigning to solve these criminal activity. We already tell you this is more effective because first it is direct, but second, most criminals don't even go on banking companies such as PayPal and such and put in a motion because it's simply traceable, right? They know that governments will be able to find these paper trails anyways. They also talk about a marginal difference and how it is still more important than the violation of rights. No, the social contract argument can only be made when there is a huge benefit that can be gained by the collective loss of privacy rights from such a large group of clients that the company has. As we have mentioned, these companies, they're not just small banking companies that a few people or a few hundred people go to. They probably have millions of clients or even billions of clients all over the world. This means that they are risking the very privacy laws that they say exist, but now they're just being contradictory. And second, let's talk about profit and political agendas, which I'll explain later in my argument. So now, they talk about moral companies, companies having the incentive to become more moral. No, they care about image, but they also care about profit too. Profit is the main driver of companies. The very reason why they're there in the first place is to gain money, right? Which is why the companies would just find more ways, worse ways, to corporation. So how will the people even know if the criminals are getting like limited anyways? Yes.
My level brought to you examples of overly lax gun laws in the US that aren't strong enough to deal with the immoral exchange of goods and services. Please explain how your laws are still strong enough even given this evidence we have presented with you.
Yeah, which is exactly why we're going to be strengthening security. We're going to be having more investigations to strengthen our laws, right? Like, that's literally our counter model. So, the solution that they provide us with these privacy laws that they also seem to contradict with, I don't really see how their solution is effective at all. So now let's talk about the political agenda. These banking companies are powerful institutions that are driven by profit, meaning whatever profits them, they follow. The standard of morality will always remain subjective to everyone, right? I think we can agree that for some people may find like a certain product moral or a certain product immoral. We think that it's very subjective, which is why it becomes extremely dangerous when you put that power to define morality in the hands of huge corporations that are driven by profit. Why? Because they're backed by power. If it's like just a normal person on the street with like a very immoral mindset, like sure, that is bad, but it's not dangerous, it's not legal, because they're not backed by power. These companies, they are so rich, they generate billions in profit every single year. They have such a huge like group of clients that they're able to influence and they're able to affect their choices. And we tell you why is the solution on their side never feasible in the first place. First is that most criminals don't even use these banking companies, right? But second, even if they do, they leave a paper trail, which just makes our model even stronger because we're able to truly crack down on a criminal that is like dumb enough to use these banking companies. But third, they put power in the hands of huge corporations to define morality when morality is already like a very gray area that is like mainly subjective to most people, right? So at the end of the day, our model is to strengthen these regulations. We're the only side of the house that is able to actually provide like direct interaction with these criminals. We're able to provide direct security. They can talk all they want about making a small marginal difference, but we're here to tell you that the small marginal difference never happens, and even if it does, it's not important, right? Because you're risking the violation of privacy rights that they want to uphold at the same time of the huge clientele that they have at the end of the day. So, what does closing government and opposition have to prove? Yes.
Can you clarify about the stricter regulation part? Is it only about those PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, those kind of companies? Or is the whole economic system?
Thank you for that, POI. What I mean is that we're going to be strengthening regulation on cracking down on criminals, right? So we're going to just be following the laws that are already in place. We already tell you that there are strict laws that like define whether something is illegal or legal. That is like agreed on generally by society and by the public. Yes.
Because companies care about their brand image in the media, they're more likely to listen to the moral standards of the people and the media rather than arbitrarily set their own. How do you respond?
If these companies really do want to listen to the like morality things, then why is their solution even like necessary? It's not necessary because all of these things that people deem immoral are already like heavily stigmatized, right? For example, if you look at sin tax, things such as smoking, things such as like drugs are very, very expensive and very hard to get, which is why the status quo right now is already enough to counter all of these illegal things. So what government side proposes to do is just to let these powerful institutions have even more power to like influence the way people think at the end of the day. So what does closing government and closing opposition have to prove if they want to win over our team in this debate? So for closing government, I think they need like a stronger model or justification on why it's like such a huge giving up of privacy rights that they want to uphold at the same time necessary just to catch this very small marginal difference that we think is already really impossible, right? And for closing opposition, we think that they have to like have a newer case and to provide better analysis than we do. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech, and I'd like to welcome the member of government to welcome the closing comments here.
The opposition side, the opening opposition gave two arguments. One is on how, since the corporations want to gain profit more than their moral duties in general, they would want to not do this, right? They're not going to do this, and then they're going to just stuff up some unreasonable, immoral stuff that will make the people deem the transactions as some transactions as impossible. So, but I think that there's two reasons why, even with profit, the big corporations will still want to like follow moral obligations that are like in society right now. So firstly, it's what the opening government said about media. So since they care about media a lot, if they decided to do something unright, such as banning people from giving Palestinians money, then the media will see that, and since people who care about the Palestinians, they would want to, they wouldn't like this. For example, if MasterCard did that, then they would not like MasterCard, and this will be the reason why they would go to other credit card companies such as Visa. And since the companies are profit-driven, if there are less people that are using their services, this will make them earn less money, and hence they would be like less profitable, right? So this, and second is about their point on how they're going to have a biased opinion. So this is same as the other one. So they talked about how the big corps, they are greedy and they're going to be biased about their stance, and they talked about how Jewish people in the companies would want to support. So this is the same thing, right? So if the people look at the companies and then they openly support the Jewish people by just saying, no, you can't you can't transfer money to Palestinians, and people would think that these credit card companies are bad. They just want to, use the privilege of taking their money and tracking their money and just stop them from doing this. Since they are profit-driven, they would not want to do this, because if they do this, then the people would literally just openly don't support them. The media are going to condemn them, and they would have less money in general. So this is why, even if they are profit-driven, they would still want to be good, right? And second, they pointed out on the paper trail. So basically, they said about how when we stop transactions, then there can be a paper trail, and if they continue their way by doing continuing transactions, then they could see it. But however, they are contradicting themselves by saying that there's privacy rules, and then that means that they cannot access the people's stuff, right? So they're directly contradicting themselves, because on our side of the house, we're easier to get these trails of money, trails of these bad people, because then we know, because we could block them, and if we block someone, if they're for example transacting drugs, we would know that they are transacting drugs, and then we could later tell the government or something like that, right? However, on their side of the house, if there's strict policies talking about privacy, then they could not trail the people who are drug trafficking, for example, because then it would be completely private to the person who is completely private, and then the credit card companies can access the information. And lastly, they pointed out on how our side, it was very ineffective, because people still use, for example, cash and something like that. And even if we take their best case scenario, that our side is, even if we take our worst case scenario, that okay, most of the people are using just dirty cash, then at least we could help save some people from, for example, fraud or scams or something like that. And next, I'm going to move on to an example, and this is CBDCs, which is central bank digital currencies. And even though this is government lead, this thing is mainly used to protect people from, for example, as I said, scams or drug trafficking or something like that. So this is an example of how our side of the house, this thing will work out, because then it is very easy for the credit card companies to actually track down the people who are doing these immoral things, and then because the government and in this case the credit card companies, they can clearly see what the people are doing with their currencies, and this could protect both the government, the companies, and the people. So moving on to our stakeholder analysis. So there's 3 stakeholders in this scenario, right? The government, the company, and the people. So talking about the government, this is kind of parallel. No, it's kind of rebutting to the opening opposition's argument on how the government could, like, they're counterfactual on how the government could also detect the things, right? So firstly, this thing takes a lot of time. If you want the government to check on everyone to see if they're doing things right, then this thing is very ineffective and it takes a long time. However, if we take our case's idea on how the people could, on how the companies could help check on the people, then the government would need to do less things because the companies could already help with some things. And then moving on to the companies, as the opening government already pointed out something similar. So basically, the companies could also gain prestige because they are the people who are tracking down the drugs, tracking down the illegal things, tracking down the illegal transactions that are actually damaging the society in general, and the companies could gain prestige. And as I said, people would be more interested in this company, even probably using their cars, for example, because they think that this company is actually reliable. Moving on to the people, first, people would be more trusted, people would be more protected, because they would be kind of protected by the credit card companies or even PayPal, because they are kind of shielded from, for example, illegal transactions, drug trades, or scams, and hence this thing would create, hence if we use these tracking, it would be easier for the governments, the companies, and the people, and it will offer better than the opposition side.
Okay, thank you for your speech, and I would like a member of opposition to be here.
So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So I'll let you start from rebutting the opposing government. So their new policy says checking what is going on in the people's credit card. This leads to have a less privacy for individual, and it's also less likely to have drug and scamming, like opening opposition has said on the first half. And so we closing opposition thinks we should not limit, or at least give the big cooperation a chance before limiting the company. Why do we say this? Because yes, cooperation has been doing evil things, like opening opposition has said, like child labor, or not paying employee well enough, or etc. And therefore, etc. And due to the increase of internet, people's morality has increased over the time, and less people are buying products that evil company are producing. Like I forgot, but Nike, I think it was one of them. And if company actually cares about their profit, if the people buy less things for the company, they'll probably start to be more friendly to the people, or like their employee. And but then why did I said give them a chance for before limiting? This is because big corporation has a lot of employees. These employees are not the people those majority of employees are not the one who makes the policy for the company. They don't just go out and then go be rude or mean to the people and don't go up to the people and not pay them.
POI.
Sure.
If your site has so strong of a private regulation, so strict that the government can't even search inside, then why don't you use self-regulation to overcome this problem?
Can you say the question again?
So in the opening opposition side, they have stated that, oh, we're going to have like privacy, stricter regulation about that. Then if we have those kind of privacy problems, why don't we use self-regulation inside the company to regulate like those trades and immorality?
Because self-regulation is not going to help. Like majority of the company, they are greedy. Why would they just go up to themselves and then start to regulating themselves? And so those big companies often have a large employees, and then those employees has families, and they have children, they have parents or wives. Okay.
Why is it reasonable to trust the consumer who has no oversight mechanism to ensure that they make good decisions and make safe transactions over the corporation who is subject to tons of media and public scrutiny to have good moral standards?
Because if we wait, can you say the last bit of the question again? I didn't hear the last bit.
Why is it reasonable to trust a consumer over a corporation who is subject to tons of media and public scrutiny to make good decisions?
I didn't say it's good to trust them. I said, but we have to trust the citizen who is choosing us. Like if they're not choosing us, why would they? They are the one who choose us. We have to try to trust them. And so going back to my argument, so this employee has a family. So when we limit these companies, if these companies is bankrupt, a large amount of the employees are going to suffer.
Point?
Yes.
These companies won't just go bankrupt because they started, limiting a bunch of immoral transactions. How
sorry.
exactly does that happen?
Sorry, I should say it more clear. The amount of the company's finance might decrease, and then therefore more employees might get fired. Not like all, but like some employee get fired. So,
COA.
sure.
These companies are large enough to have reasonable capital reserves to weather the storm if they do lose a bit of money. So how exactly do employees get fired on the other side?
What?
These companies have large enough capital reserves to weather the storm if a bunch of small amounts of profits go down. So how exactly are employees getting fired on the other side?
So we said limited. So limiting as in like making them pay more tax, or like making them have to like making them add a tax and such things. So when we limit the company, the citizen also might feel the inconvenience. And this is bad because all the point of the credit card and those things is for the convenience of the citizens. And if we limit the convenience for the citizen, maybe we can save, yes, 1 or 2 people, like the government has said, but we value our own people's convenience more than somebody's elsewhere, I guess say. And we cannot just like go up to a company and just go tell them to just change it right now. And that's why I support this argument.
Okay, thank you for your speech, and moving on to the government vote. Here.
So I think there's actually a misunderstanding about immoral and illegal in the part of opening opposition. They have clearly stated that, oh, if they're trading like drugs, that's illegal. Yes, that's illegal. But selling vape is not illegal, but it's immoral. It will make others' health worse, and it will like probably make them have like cancers or things like that. But selling vape, is it legal? Yes, it's legal. Is it immoral? Yes, it's immoral. So this is how those MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, those kind of companies need to actually deem those products. In their side, they have stated that they need more investigations. But when you don't have a law that says vape is illegal or things like that, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to investigate you. Why? Because vape is immoral. You can do like that, right? When you do investigation, first you need laws. Second, you need to have saying like stated this is yes.
Who are you to say that vape is immoral? If the government deems that it's moral enough to be legalized, why should you as a company be the one to deem it as immoral?
When you're saying about like government says about this is moral, when you are saying about like this is laws and morals, morals is about your mindset, about is this actually the right thing? Will this actually feed back to society? The laws is the fundamental, the deepest part, the last line to step in the morals. If you do, yes, there's still immoral stuff like you go to have like something that children should have. Well, they said, oh, you're doing illegal stuff. No, but everyone will know this is immoral, right? And also, like, if you have those kind of, yes.
My question is, why is the company the one to be able to decide what's immoral or not? Why are they the factor in this debate that get to decide? If it's my money, I get to spend it however I like. I have free will, even if other people see it as immoral.
So when you're saying about like you have an 18-year-old kid who's just going into society, he chooses PayPal. Why he choose PayPal? He think that this can let him have like more freedom. He can actually like buy things on it, and then he found vape. Did you think that as PayPal's like worker, will you want an 18-year-old guy future just being destroyed by this just vape?
You know why?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because as a company, you have credibility and responsibility to let your consumers or let your customers do whatever they want. Why should you be limiting how they want to spend their money as a company?
When you're saying about like limiting customers, yes, this is limiting customers' will. What we are doing is to impact the society. We're not only to say, oh, because that this is your freedom, so I'm giving you freedom to let you have cancer. No, we don't let them have freedom to have cancer, right? We let them to have the ability to choose. But, okay.
Even if it is the company's right to show whether something is immoral or not, there are already things such as sin taxes in place that prevent most people from like taking these vapes or trying to buy these immoral things.
Can you say that again?
Like there are already things in place such as sin tax that make these things less accessible. Like they're more expensive. So there are already things in place that already make people like it's not that accessible for people to buy these immoral things.
Yes, they did have those taxes, but even they have those taxes, there's still like teenagers finding like those loopholes inside those companies like PayPal or something like that, TV,
You know
things
why?
like that. And
At the end of the day, you've already taken so many measures to prove that these teenagers are this is like immoral. But at the end of the day, it's their decision. It's up to them whether or not they actually want to take this action and choose to be able to do however they please.
so now we're arguing about what is customers. Like, if you want to let your customers have the freedom to like just get like those diseases in their future life, let them be tortured by those stuff, would you want to see your customers being tortured by because they have vape like 10 years ago? Would you want this?
You know what? If that's the case, then why do vape companies and cigarette companies exist? Because they want to make money, because they want profit. Why else would they exist? They know it's bad for the customers, but they don't care.
Yeah, so that's why we're saying like there's need to be a moral line. There need to be a line to defend those. So when we're also saying about your side have say like privacy or things like that, won't things like Telegram, but like MasterCard version happens, when they have like a kind of like place for transaction and buying or selling things, won't them say like, oh, this is my privacy. I won't give government you those kind of information. Just like Telegram, when they're having those trades and other kind of like, that's also immoral and illegal. When you have those kind of companies that refuse your investigation, what can you do? When they're based in like Russia, what will French government do? No, they cannot do anything. Sure.
However, a few years ago, there was this case where the government clearly gained access to Telegram's leaked group chats. That's why we know about all the bad things happening in Telegram, because the government was able to access it.
But even when they have like those access, it's too late. We're actually regulating, self-regulating like inside the company to first have a process. We're first saving people in the first step, while you, on your side, are saving people in the last step. While things already happen, while things that is being said in social media, then you found out, oh, this thing's happened already. So we're not wanting to like stop this process in the last step when things already occurs, illegal stuff already happens, and then we take those actions. We want to take actions to prevent them from getting like illegal or immoral stuffs. So when we're talking about this kind of stuffs, our side, self-regulating and having those process, although this might cause our customers inconvenience, this protects the society and the customers. That's why I'm so proud to propose.
Thank you for your speech. Then, opposition, let's be here.
Okay, so I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So first, I'm going to introduce a new model to the solution of like for opening opposition. They say that they should strengthen the laws of like stuff to like restrict customers to buy the immoral products, and so I would like to show that actually societal reforms such as like classes in schools to teach kids what is really immoral, and so that they could decide their own decisions when they're like when they grow up and buy their own stuff online especially. And when we teach these kids the immoral products that they should not buy, such as like drugs and stuff, they could be they will have the ability to make their own good decisions, so they wouldn't hurt themselves, like in the future and harm themselves. And also that so closing government said that vape is like not illegal but immoral. But actually, like how does payment processors like Visa and MasterCard like just can regulate that? Because cash can go buy vape, like we can use cash to buy vape, and actually instead of like making payment processors, we could like
POI.
yes.
So you mean that those companies like MasterCard and PayPal don't have the responsibility to actually impact the society about those immorality issues for
No.
their customers?
I meant places where we could get those immoral products are not just online or by paying by using the payment processors. We could use like cash to buy it. People does it like underground or something so that like no processors could find it. And also that so yeah, societal reforms, they teach kids and teach people like of all ages, like
Noah,
yeah.
don't you agree that if we at least make it somewhat more difficult for these bad people to do bad things towards other people or themselves, or at least making at least somewhat of a difference by saving one single life, even at least one single life with our model on our side, by making things inconvenient for them.
Instead of making things inconvenient for them, we could like have our own good mindset, products, and to harm ourselves. So like, yeah, we could like teach kids like to like not buy drugs, not buy guns to go out to kill people. Yeah.
There's a lot sufficient drug education in the world right now. Like there's schools that they have posters on how like you should not consume drugs, but still people consume drugs. And isn't the credit card company the last resort for people to save them from these drugs?
Yeah, no, that is like the last time, right? Like the processors are like the last time to save these people. But like before that, the mindset of these customers, it has to be like set to like have like to make moral decisions, right? And yeah, this is why we need like guidance education to like teach people what to do. And also that yes, like so like not all people like they use payment processors to buy not use like payments that need like payment processors to buy stuff. Like drug dealers, they don't use they don't use card, so they won't go through like Visa or stuff. They just bring in a bunch of cash to like trade drugs, right? So it doesn't really regulate anything. And instead of letting these drug dealers continue on, we could like just start like setting a new mindset of good moral decisions, so that there won't be any more drug dealers and less people who were tricked into getting these drugs and buying those illegal or immoral products. And yes, and that is why I'm so hard to propose. Oh no, oppose, sorry.